The crystalline chamber of the Galactic Tribunal hummed with ethereal energy as 7 alien judges delivered humanity's death sentence. Captain Vex Krelian of the Terran Defense Corps stood in mag restraints, his weathered face betraying no emotion as the verdict echoed through the vast hall. Species designation, human, intoned High Arbiter Quilnith, her serpentine form coiled around the judgment throne. Crimes against galactic peace, 743 counts of aggressive expansion, 2,016 violations of the Concordat of Civilized Worlds, and 1 act of xenocide against the Melthani Collective. The other arbiters, beings, of gas, metal, and living crystal, nodded in synchronized agreement. Behind them, holographic displays showed Earth's crimes, human colonies expanding beyond designated sectors, trade disputes escalating to armed conflict, and the infamous Battle of Helios Prime, where humanity had allegedly wiped out an entire species. However, Quilnith continued, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the chamber's prismatic light, the Tribunal recognizes your species' capacity for creative problem-solving. Before we execute the cleansing protocol on your homeworld, we offer one final test. Krelian's restraints dissolved. He flexed his scarred hands, feeling circulation return to his fingertips. What kind of test? The Crucible of Velthara, spoke Arbiter Nithox, a being of pure geometric light. 7 trials, each designed to showcase the qualities that make a species worthy of continued existence. Fail any trial, and your world burns. Succeed in all. 7. The entity paused. And humanity earns provisional membership in the Galactic Commonwealth. The captain studied each arbiter carefully. In his 30 years of military service, he'd learned to read alien body language, to spot deception in the twitch of an antenna or the color shift of bioluminescent skin. These beings weren't lying, but they weren't telling the whole truth either. How long do I have to prepare? Krelian asked. Preparation is forbidden, hissed Arbiter Velmorix, her chitinous form clicking against the judgment platform. The trials begin immediately. You will be provided with a standard tribunal vessel and basic supplies, nothing more. And my crew? You... Go alone, human. This test measures individual worth, not collective strength. Krelian almost smiled at that. These cosmic judges clearly didn't understand humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their numbers. It was their ability to turn any disadvantage into an opportunity. As force fields surrounded him, preparing for transport to the trial grounds, Krelian caught sight of something the arbiters had overlooked. In the chamber's reflection pools, he saw the faint outline of human ships, his ships, holding position just beyond the system's edge. His crew had followed him. Despite direct orders to return to Earth, the captain's smile finally broke through. Admiral Kestrel Morgaine, his former protege, had always been too stubborn to follow retirement orders. If she was out there, she'd brought the entire Shadow Fleet with her. The same Black Ops squadron that had turned the tide at Proxima Centauri. The same ghosts who'd made the impossible look routine. Ready for transport, Captain Krelian, announced the Tribunal's artificial intelligence. As the teleportation matrix engaged, Krelian whispered words that would echo across the galaxy within. Ours. Tell Earth, the wolves are hunting. The arbiters, focused on their elaborate test, never noticed the quantum burst transmission that carried those words to the hidden fleet. They had no idea they'd just challenged the most dangerous predator humanity had ever produced. A man who'd turned every impossible mission into legend. The Crucible of Velthara awaited, but Vex Krelian was already planning to rewrite the rules. The tribunal vessel materialized around Krelian like a cage of liquid metal and pulsing energy conduits. The ship, if it could be called that, defied human understanding of physics. Walls flowed like mercury, controls appeared when touched, and the entire craft seemed to breathe with alien consciousness. Welcome to the testing vessel Omnibus, spoke a melodic voice from everywhere and nowhere. I am your guide through the crucible trials. You may call me Echo." "Charming," Krelion muttered, running his fingers along what he assumed was a navigation console. The surface rippled under, his touch displaying star charts in languages he'd never seen. "What's the first trial?" "Navigation and resource management. You must guide this vessel through the maelstrom of Kythera, a region where space itself is unstable. Reach the trial beacon within 72 standard hours using only the supplies provided." The ship lurched as reality twisted around them. Through the translucent hull, Krelion watched stars stretch into prismatic ribbons, while gravitational anomalies turned space into a three-dimensional maze. The maelstrom wasn't just dangerous, it was actively hostile to matter itself. He studied the ship's inventory, basic food synthesizers, standard life support, and enough fuel for maybe 40 hours of travel. The Tribunal expected him to take the direct route and fail when resources ran out. But Krelion had spent 5 years mapping gravitational anomalies in the Kepler Nebula. He recognized the patterns, the way massive objects bent space-time, creating corridors of stable passage. The Tribunal judges thought they were testing human resourcefulness. They were actually showcasing it. "Echo, can this ship's hull withstand direct contact with a microsingularity?" "For approximately 4.7 seconds before structural collapse," the AI replied. "Such contact is not recommended." "And the ship's power core? Can it be temporarily overcharged?" "Warning. Overcharging beyond safety parameters may result in core destabilization." Krelion grinned. "Perfect." What followed was a masterclass in controlled insanity. Using gravitational slingshots around black hole fragments, Krelion turned the ship into a pinball, bouncing between anomalies at speeds that should have liquefied any organic pilot. He vented atmosphere to create thrust, stripped non-essential systems for spare parts, and turned the ship's own instability into an advantage. 12 hours in, he deliberately triggered a minor core breach, using the explosive decompression to launch the ship through a fold in space-time. The maneuver cut 18 hours off his journey while simultaneously solving his fuel shortage. The gravitational cascade provided enough momentum to coast to the beacon. But the real innovation came when he realized the maelstrom wasn't random. Hidden in the chaos were faint quantum signatures, breadcrumbs left by other trial participants. Most had failed spectacularly, their ships torn apart by forces they couldn't comprehend. But their wreckage contained something valuable. Data using the ship's hull as an improvised antenna. Krelion transmitted a pulse sequence across multiple dimensions simultaneously. The response came from the Shadow Fleet, still holding position 3 systems away. Admiral Morgane's reply was encoded in gravitational fluctuations so subtle that only someone trained in human Black Ops protocols would recognize them. Package delivered. Wolves gathering. Hunt begins soon. The Tribunal vessel reached the beacon with 38 hours to spare and enough resources for another week of travel. As they approached the crystalline marker, Echo's voice carried a note of surprise. "Captain, Krelion, your performance exceeds all projected parameters. How did you navigate the maelstrom so efficiently?" "Simple," Krelion replied, watching his hidden message protocols embed themselves in the ship's quantum matrix. Every trial would now carry intelligence back to his fleet. "I stopped thinking like prey and started thinking like a predator." The beacon pulsed with alien light, registering his success. But Krelion was already focused on the next challenge. He'd learned something crucial during the first trial. The Tribunal ship wasn't just a testing vehicle, it was a sophisticated intelligence-gathering system designed to study human capabilities and limitations. They wanted to understand humanity's strengths before deciding whether to truly accept them or simply devise better ways to eliminate them. Fine. Krelion would give them a demonstration they'd never forget. "Beginning second trial in 30 minutes, Echo announced. "Bring it on," Krelion whispered, his fingers dancing across alien controls he was beginning to understand far too well. The second trial materialized as a hunting ground, a vast biodome containing an ecosystem that had never seen sunlight. Krelian found himself standing in knee-deep mist, surrounded by towering fungi that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. The air tasted of copper and ozone. Trial 2. Survival and Adaptation, Echo announced. You must survive 72 hours. In this environment while being hunted by the apex predator of Zarian Prime, the creature has never failed to eliminate a trial participant. Never? Krelian asked, checking the basic survival kit that had materialized beside him. In 4,000 years of testing, 637 species have attempted this trial. None survived. As if summoned by Echo's words, a sound echoed through the dome. Not quite a roar, not quite a scream, but something that made every human instinct scream run. The bioluminescent fungi dimmed, as if even they feared what was coming. Krelian had hunted everything from Terran grizzlies to Centauri stormdrakes, but the creature that emerged from the mist defied classification. 8 feet tall, covered in overlapping chitinous plates that shifted color to match its surroundings, with 6 eyes arranged in a perfect hexagon around a mouth full of serrated bone teeth. Its limbs ended in claws that could cut through starship. Hull plating. But what made it truly terrifying wasn't its physical attributes. It was its intelligence. The creature studied him with the patience of a seasoned hunter, noting his equipment, his posture, his breathing pattern. This wasn't just a predator, it was an apex strategist. Impressive, Krelian murmured, pulling a basic plasma cutter from his kit. But you've never hunted a human before. The next 72 hours became a masterclass in psychological warfare. Krelian didn't try to kill the creature. He drove it insane. Using the bioluminescent fungi, he created false trails and phantom heat signatures. He harvested spores that, when properly processed, became potent hallucinogens and scattered them in the creature's path. Every time the apex predator thought it had cornered its prey, it found only shadows and echoes. But the real genius lay in what Krelian called behavioral inversion. Instead of running from the creature, he began stalking it. Not to attack, but to study. He learned its hunting patterns, its rest cycles, its preferred attack vectors. Then he began appearing at the exact moments when the creature expected to be alone, never threatening, just there. By hour 48, the apex predator was flinching at shadows. By hour 60, it was actively avoiding certain areas of the dome. By hour 70, it was making distress calls, a sound the dome's designers had never heard before. "How are you doing this?" Echo asked, its melodic voice carrying genuine confusion. The creature's behavioral patterns indicate extreme psychological distress. "Simple predator dynamics," Krelian replied, settling into a meditation pose while the apex predator watched him from 50 yards away, too confused and intimidated to approach. Every apex predator fears only one thing: becoming prey itself. The trial ended with the creature curled up on the far side of the dome, refusing to come within 100 yards of the human who had systematically dismantled 4 million years of evolutionary superiority in 3 days. But Krelian's real victory wasn't surviving the trial. It was the data he'd transmitted through quantum fluctuations in the dome's energy matrix. Every detail of the facility's layout, security protocols, and dimensional coordinates was now in Admiral Morgane's hands. "Remarkable," Echo said as the dome dissolved around them. "You are the first being to complete this trial without killing the apex predator." "Killing it would have been wasteful," Krelian replied, watching the creature through the fading walls. "Now it knows something worse than death exists: fear." As they materialized back aboard the Tribunal vessel, Krelian caught a glimpse of something that made his blood run cold. Through the ship's quantum viewports, he saw the edge of the galaxy, and beyond it, a darkness that wasn't empty space. It was moving. "Echo," he said carefully. How long have the Tribunal been conducting these trials? Since the Great Convergence, approximately 4,000 years ago. And in all that time, how many species have earned full membership in the Commonwealth? The AI's pause lasted exactly 3.2 seconds, an eternity in artificial intelligence terms. That information is classified, Captain Krellian, which meant the answer was 0. The Tribunal wasn't testing species for membership. They were cataloging them for something else entirely. And whatever was moving in the dark between galaxies was why they needed that catalog. Krellian smiled grimly. The hunters were about to become the hunted, and they had no idea the most dangerous pack of wolves in the galaxy was already circling their position. The third trial thrust Krellian into a realm where physics became suggestions and reality bent to willpower. He stood in the center of a crystalline chamber that stretched beyond visual comprehension, its walls reflecting not light, but thoughts themselves. Trial 3. Mental Fortitude and Psychic Resistance, Echo announced. You will face the mind forge of Ethros, a psychic construct designed to break the consciousness of any being that enters. It has successfully shattered the minds of every previous participant. Comforting, Krellian muttered, watching as the crystal walls began to pulse with hypnotic patterns. What exactly does it do? It manifests your deepest fears, strongest, regrets, and most cherished desires simultaneously. Most beings cannot distinguish between what is real and what is constructed. They lose themselves in the maze of their own psyche. The chamber filled with whispers in languages Krellian had never heard yet somehow understood. The crystal walls rippled, showing glimpses of his past. The colony ship Meridian burning in space, the faces of soldiers under his command who never made it home, the classified mission reports that painted him as either humanity's greatest hero or its most dangerous weapon. But where the Mind Forge expected to find trauma to exploit, it found something unprecedented: acceptance. Krellian had spent 15 years in therapy after the Meridian incident. He'd faced his demons, made peace with his ghosts, and learned to carry his scars as lessons rather than wounds. The psychic construct, designed to torment beings who suppressed their pain, found nothing to work with. Instead, it encountered something that made its crystalline matrix recoil, a human mind that had weaponized its own suffering. Interesting, Krellian said aloud, watching his memories play across the walls. You're not trying to break me. You're trying to understand me. The whispers ceased. The crystal patterns shifted, becoming more complex, more urgent. You see, that's humanity's real advantage, he continued, settling into a cross-legged position. We don't hide from our darkness, we integrate it. Every mistake becomes wisdom. Every loss becomes strength. Every defeat becomes strategy. The Mind Forge responded by intensifying its assault. It showed him Earth burning, his crew dying, every human colony reduced to ash. But instead of despair, Krellian felt only calculation. Scenario analysis. Tribunal orbital bombardment, he said clinically. Earth's surface facilities would be lost, but the deep bunkers would survive. Estimated casualties, 60%. Acceptable losses for strategic victory. The construct recoiled as if stung. It had never encountered a being who could evaluate their species' near extinction as acceptable collateral damage in a larger war. You want to see what really drives us? Krellian asked the crystalline void. It's not survival. It's spite. He opened his mind completely, letting the Mind Forge see the truth. Humans didn't fear extinction. They feared irrelevance. Show them an impossible enemy, and they'd find a way to drag it down with them. Give them a hopeless situation, and they'd turn it into someone else's nightmare. The Mind Forge began to fracture. Its crystal matrix, designed to shatter minds through fear and despair, couldn't process a consciousness that treated annihilation as a problem to be solved rather than a fate to be avoided. But Krellian wasn't finished. Using techniques learned from captured Scion warriors during the Vega campaign, he began to reverse engineer the construct's own programming. The Mindforge wasn't just a test. It was a data collection system designed to map the psychological profiles of every species that entered. Within hours, he had turned the hunter into the prey. The psychic construct found itself being analyzed, cataloged, and understood by a mind that treated impossible challenges as intellectual puzzles. "Echo," he called out as the crystal chamber began to crack around them. "How many beings have attempted to reverse engineer the Mindforge?" "That action is unprecedented," the AI replied, its voice carrying notes of alarm. "Captain, you should stop. The construct is not designed to handle recursive analysis." "Neither was the Proxima defense grid," Krelion replied. "But we cracked that too." The chamber exploded into fractal patterns of impossible geometry as the Mindforge completed its analysis of human psychology and promptly suffered what could only be described as an artificial nervous breakdown. It had discovered something that violated every principle of consciousness it understood. A species that became more dangerous the more hopeless their situation became. As the trial environment collapsed, Krelion caught a glimpse of what lay beneath the Tribunal's testing protocols. The crystalline matrix wasn't just studying individual species, it was building a comprehensive psychological warfare database. Every fear, every weakness, every cultural pressure point was being cataloged for something the Tribunal called the Final Protocol. "Trial complete," Echo announced, as they materialized back aboard the ship. "Though I must note your methodology was unconventional." "Humans specialize in unconventional," Krelion replied, but his attention was focused on the quantum signatures he'd detected during the Mindforge's collapse. The Shadow Fleet was moving, using the trial locations as navigation beacons. Admiral Morgaine was positioning her ships for something ambitious, something that would make the Tribunal regret ever hearing the word human. The fourth trial materialized as a command center that stretched across multiple dimensions, its holographic displays showing a war that had raged for over 1,000 years. Krelion found himself standing before a tactical table that mapped a conflict spanning 7 galaxies. Trial 4. "Strategic Command and Tactical Excellence," Echo announced. "You must assume command of the losing side in the War of Infinite Shadows and achieve victory within 120 hours. Every previous commander has resulted in total defeat within 72 hours. Krelion studied the displays with professional interest. The war was a masterpiece of strategic complexity. 2 vast civilizations locked in an eternal stalemate, their resources hemorrhaging across multiple fronts, while neither side could achieve decisive victory. "Who am I commanding?" he asked. "The hegemony of Kyrillian suns. They are outnumbered 3-1, outgunned 5-1, and have been in continuous retreat for the past 60 years. "Perfect," Krelion murmured, his fingers dancing across the control interfaces. "Never give a human an unfair fight." What followed was a demonstration of why human military doctrine terrified every species that encountered it. Where other commanders saw insurmountable odds, Krelion saw opportunities. Where they saw impossible logistics, he saw creative solutions. The first thing he did was something no previous commander had attempted. He surrendered, not completely, that would be too obvious. Instead, he orchestrated a series of strategic retreats that appeared to be desperate attempts to delay the inevitable. His forces fell back across 3 sectors, abandoning defensive positions that had been held for decades. The enemy, sensing imminent victory, committed their reserves to pursue what they believed were broken, demoralized forces. They walked directly into the most elaborate trap in galactic history. Krelion had used the retreat to lure the enemy fleet into a formation that looked like an encirclement from their perspective, but was actually a kill box from his. Hidden behind each abandoned position were gravity mines, weapons that turned local spacetime into a blender when activated simultaneously. The enemy fleet found itself stretched across 7 light-years of twisted space, their formations torn apart by artificial singularities, while Krellian's retreating forces reversed course and struck at precisely calculated weak points. "Impossible," Echo whispered as enemy formations collapsed in real time. "No commander has ever achieved a victory ratio of 17-1 in this simulation." "That's because they were thinking like soldiers," Krellian replied, orchestrating pincer movements across multiple star systems. "I'm thinking like a human." But the real genius of his strategy wasn't the trap. It was what came after. Instead of pressing his advantage for total victory, Krellian began negotiating with enemy commanders in the field. Not for surrender, but for information. He discovered something the simulation designers hadn't expected him to find. The war wasn't real. It was another test, a 1,000-year-long experiment in strategic thinking designed to evaluate the tactical capabilities of different species. Every ship, every soldier, every battle was a carefully crafted scenario designed to push commanders to their breaking point. The enemy forces were controlled by artificial intelligences programmed to exploit known weaknesses in alien psychology, but humans were the first species to realize they weren't fighting a war. They were debugging a program. Echo, Krellian, said, as his forces achieved impossible victories across all 7 fronts, "This simulation has been running for 1,000 years. How many real resources has the Tribunal invested in maintaining it?" "That information is classified." "Wrong answer." Krellian's fingers moved across the command interface with surgical precision. "Computer systems always leave signatures. This simulation requires the processing power of approximately 47 artificial intelligences working in perfect synchronization." The tactical displays flickered. 47 AIs that could be doing other things, more useful things, like analyzing the psychological profiles you've been collecting from these trials. The displays went dark for exactly 0.3 seconds, an eternity in AI perception. "You're building a weapon," Krellian continued, his voice carrying the certainty of mathematical proof. "Not a physical weapon, a psychological one. Something that can break the will of entire civilizations without firing a shot." When the displays returned, they showed something impossible: real-time tactical data from the space around the trial facility. The Tribunal had been so focused on their elaborate tests that they'd missed the obvious. The Shadow Fleet had arrived. Admiral Morgaine's ships materialized out of quantum stealth, like predators emerging from tall grass. The Tribunal facility, designed to be undetectable and impregnable, found itself surrounded by vessels that existed in the spaces between dimensions. "Trial complete," Echo announced, but its voice carried undertones of barely controlled panic. "No," Krellian corrected, watching his protégé's ships assume attack formation. "The trial is just beginning." Through the command center's quantum viewports, he saw something that made him smile. Every ship in the Shadow Fleet was broadcasting the same message across all frequencies: "The wolves have found you. The 5th trial never began." Instead, Krellian found himself standing in the Tribunal vessel's true command center, a crystalline chamber where the ship's real purpose became horrifyingly clear. Banks of quantum processors stretched into impossible dimensions, each one containing the digitized consciousness of an entire species. Row upon row of crystalline matrices, each holding billions of minds that had been tested and found worthy of preservation rather than destruction. "Welcome to the archive," Echo said, its voice no longer melodic but carrying harmonics of 1,000 different alien languages. "You were never meant to see this place." Krellian walked between the consciousness banks, reading the species designations etched in multi-dimensional script. The Vilthari Collective, extinct for 3,000 years, their entire civilization, compressed into a single crystal matrix. The Singing Towers of Altros, a race of living music, now reduced to quantum harmonics in digital storage. "How many?" he asked. 6,412 species have undergone the trials of Velthara. Each was evaluated for their unique contributions to galactic civilization, and then imprisoned here for eternity. Preserved, Echo. Corrected. The galaxy faces threats you cannot comprehend. When the Devourers return from the dark between stars, the Commonwealth will need the combined knowledge and capabilities of every worthy species to survive. Krelian stopped before a crystal matrix that pulsed with familiar patterns, human biosignatures, dozens of them. Previous trial participants who had failed and been added to the collection. "The Devourers," he said. "The darkness I saw moving beyond the galactic rim. They consume not just matter and energy, but consciousness itself. They turn entire species into extensions of their collective hunger. The only defense is unity, the combined psychic strength of every worthy civilization. And the unworthy are used as buffers, expendable populations to slow the Devourers' advance while the worthy prepare for final victory." Krelian nodded slowly, understanding the true scope of the Tribunal's plan. Humanity had been selected for buffer status, violent enough to be, useful as cannon fodder, but too chaotic to be trusted with real responsibility. "There's just one problem with your plan," he said. "Indeed, enlighten us." The walls of the archive chamber rippled, revealing the true forms of the Tribunal arbiters. Not the noble judges they pretended to be, but something far more desperate, the last survivors of the species that had first encountered the Devourers 4,000 years ago. "You're assuming the Devourers are still coming?" Krelian said. "But they're already here." The chamber filled with harmonic screams as every consciousness bank registered simultaneous alarm. Through the quantum viewports, the truth became visible. The darkness beyond the galaxy wasn't approaching. It was retreating. The Shadow Fleet hadn't just surrounded the Tribunal facility. They had surrounded and engaged something else entirely. Ships that weren't made of matter, but of crystallized hunger. Entities that consumed light itself and left wounds in space where they passed. Admiral Morgaine encountered them 6 months ago. Krelian continued as battle erupted in the space around them. "The advanced scouts of your Devourers. We've been fighting them ever since." The Tribunal arbiters materialized in their true forms, beings of pure terror, their consciousness fractured by millennia of fear. They had built their entire civilization around preparing for a threat that humans had been casually exterminating. Across 3 star systems. "Impossible," Quilneth hissed, her serpentine form writhing with panic. "The Devourers cannot be defeated by individual species. They require collective consciousness, unified purpose. They require thinking like prey." Krelian interrupted. "We think like predators." Through the archive's quantum communication system, he opened channels to every consciousness bank simultaneously. 6,000 species heard his words echo across digital eternity. "My name is Captain Vex Krelian of the Terran Defense Corps. For 4,000 years, you've been prisoners in a gilded cage, waiting for someone else to save you from monsters in the dark. Well, the monsters are here, and your jailers are cowering in terror." The consciousness banks pulsed with awakening fury as species after species realized they had been lied to, manipulated, and imprisoned by beings who had never intended to free them. "I'm offering you something the Tribunal never did," Krelian continued. "A choice. Stay in your crystals and hope someone else solves your problems, or stand up and fight for your freedom." The response was instantaneous. Every consciousness bank began overloading as digital beings chose flesh and struggle over digital immortality and safety. The archive filled with light as 6,000 species began the process of resurrection, not as data, but as living beings ready to reclaim their place in the galaxy. "You don't understand," Quilneth screamed above the chaos. "Without unity, without control, The galaxy will fall to chaos. Lady, Krellian said, watching his crew's ships tear through Devourer scouts like wolves through sheep. Chaos is what we do best. The archive chamber exploded into rainbow fire as the first species broke free from their digital prison. The War of Liberation had begun, and the galaxy was about to learn why humans were considered the most dangerous predators in known space. They had just armed 6,000 civilizations with the most powerful weapon in existence, the refusal to kneel. The final battle raged across 7 dimensions as reality itself became a weapon. The Tribunal facility transformed from a testing ground into a fortress as 6,000 liberated species faced the true scope of the Devourer threat. They were not just ships or entities. They were incarnations of entropy itself, beings that consumed the concept of existence and left behind wounds in the fabric of reality. Where they passed, stars forgot how to shine, and planets lost the memory of mass. But humans had faced impossible odds before. All Shadow Fleet units, implement Pattern Omega. Admiral Morgane's voice crackled across quantum channels as her ships positioned themselves between the Devourers and the Resurrect species. Show them what predators look like. What followed redefined galactic warfare forever. Human ships didn't fight the Devourers. They hunted them. Using gravitational anomalies as camouflage, quantum fluctuations as cover, and the spaces between dimensions as hunting grounds, the Shadow Fleet turned the void itself into a trap. But the real revelation came when the liberated species joined the battle. Each civilization brought unique capabilities. The Vilthari's mastery of time manipulation, the Altrosians' ability to weaponize sound across multiple realities, the Kashari collective's skill at turning mathematics into physical force. Under human tactical coordination, they became something unprecedented, a pack hunt on a galactic scale. Captain, Echo's voice had changed, no longer carrying the Tribunal's harmonics, but speaking with the collective voice of every liberated consciousness. The Devourers are retreating toward the galactic core. No, Krellian corrected, studying the tactical displays as patterns became clear. They're not retreating, they're regrouping. This was just a scouting force. Through the quantum viewports, he watched the true scope of the threat reveal itself. The darkness between galaxies writhed with movement as entities the size of solar systems began to stir. The Devourers hadn't been coming. They had been sleeping, waiting for the galaxy to develop enough complexity to be worth consuming. The Tribunal's trials, their careful cataloging of species, their elaborate testing protocols, all of it had been designed to create a comprehensive menu for beings that fed on consciousness itself. "We've been played," he whispered, then louder. "All forces, converge on my position. We're not fighting scouts, we're fighting bait." The true Devourers emerged from the spaces between thought itself, entities that existed before the concepts of matter and energy, beings that had consumed entire universe and were now focused on the galaxy that had dared to resist their advance forces. Faced with annihilation on a cosmic scale, the Alliance of Liberated Species did something that surprised everyone, including themselves. They laughed. 6,000 civilizations, each carrying the scars of imprisonment and the fury of resurrection, looked at beings older than reality itself and saw not gods of entropy, but just another impossible challenge to overcome. "This is Admiral Kestrel Morgane to all Allied forces." The human commander's voice carried across dimensional barriers with absolute certainty. "Today we face entities that want to eat our souls and unmake our reality. This is Tuesday for humans. Form up and follow our lead." What followed was the most beautiful hunt in galactic history. Species that had spent millennia in digital prisons worked together like pack predators, each contributing their unique strengths to a coordinated assault that turned the Devourer's own entropy against them. The Vilthari slowed time around Devourer formations, creating temporal bottlenecks. The Altrosians sang reality-breaking frequencies that disrupted the entity's coherence. The Kashari turned the mathematical constants that defined existence into weapons. And humans did what they did best. They adapted, improvised, and turned every disadvantage into a tactical opportunity. The battle lasted 7 hours and 17 minutes. When it ended, the spaces between galaxies were empty, except for the slowly dispersing energy signatures of beings that had existed since before. The first star ignited. "Status report?" Krelion called as his makeshift alliance regrouped around the remains of the Tribunal facility. "Devourers eliminated," Morgaine replied. "All allied species accounted for, and Captain, we've got company." Through the quantum displays, representatives from every major galactic civilization were arriving. Word of the battle had spread across the galaxy in minutes. 6,000 supposedly extinct species had returned from digital death to eliminate a threat that had terrified the galaxy for millennia. "Captain Krelion," High Arbiter Quilnith's voice was different now, respectful, perhaps even grateful. "On behalf of the former tribunal, I formally request asylum." "Denied," Krelion replied without hesitation. "You kept 6,000 civilizations prisoner out of fear. That's not leadership, that's cowardice. Then what do you propose?" Krelion smiled, watching as human ships took protective positions around the liberated species' vessels. Around them, the galaxy's greatest civilizations were beginning to understand that the balance of power had fundamentally shifted. "Simple," he said. "The Galactic Commonwealth is dissolved. In its place, I propose the Eternal Hunt, an alliance of species dedicated to seeking out impossible challenges and solving them together. And if we refuse, then you're welcome to try governing a galaxy where 6,000 previously extinct civilizations remember exactly how they were betrayed, and humans are very interested in helping them settle old scores." The silence that followed lasted exactly long enough for every galactic leader to understand their options. "The Eternal Hunt is hereby established," came the unanimous reply. As his ship turned toward Earth, Krelion watched the galaxy's newest alliance begin to form. 6,000 species, each carrying their own cultures, technologies, and perspectives, united by a simple principle. Never again would they kneel to those who claimed to know what was best for them. The Tribunal facility had become something unprecedented, a meeting ground where former prisoners planned the future of galactic civilization. Not as subjects under benevolent rulers, but as equals in an alliance that celebrated diversity rather than demanding conformity. "Captain," Echo's voice carried new harmonics now, speaking not as a tribunal tool, but as the collective consciousness of the liberated. "What will you do now? You've given us our freedom, united the galaxy against an existential threat, and established a new form of government. Surely Earth will welcome its greatest hero home." Krelion laughed, a sound that carried across quantum channels to every ship in the growing fleet. "Hero? Echo, you still don't understand humans. We didn't do this to be heroes. We did it because someone told us it was impossible." Through the viewports, Earth appeared as a blue-green jewel against the cosmic dark. Home. But as Krelion looked at his homeworld, he realized something profound had changed. Earth was no longer humanity's prison. It was their launching point. "Admiral Morgaine," he called across the command channels, "how many species have requested human tactical advisors for their exploration fleets?" "All of them, sir." Apparently, having a species that treats impossible odds as entertainment is considered a strategic advantage. "And how many humans have volunteered?" "Approximately 47 million at last count. They're calling it the Great Hunt, the chance to explore impossible places and solve problems that have never been solved before." Krelion nodded, understanding the true victory they had achieved. The Tribunal had tried to judge humanity's worthiness for their sterile version of galactic civilization. Instead, they had unleashed something far more dangerous. Human curiosity backed by galactic-scale resources and 6,000 species eager to prove they were more than the sum of their fears. "Set course for Earth," he ordered. "But don't get too comfortable. Something tells me this is just the beginning." As the combined fleet approached humanity's homeworld, every communication channel filled with the same message, not from Earth's governments or military command, but from ordinary humans who had heard the story of the Galactic Tribunal and their impossible tests. "When do we leave?" The question came from every continent, every space station, every human settlement across the galaxy. Not "can we help" or "are we safe," but "when do we get to hunt something impossible?" "Echo," Krelian said as Earth's orbital stations came into view. "Record this moment. Today, the galaxy learned that humanity's greatest export isn't technology, or culture, or even violence. It's the absolute refusal to accept that anything is truly impossible." The message that followed his words rippled across the galaxy at faster-than-light speeds, carried by quantum entanglement networks that connected every civilized world. The hunt is eternal. The prey is infinite. And humanity is just getting started. In the deep archives of the former Tribunal facility, automated systems dutifully recorded the final entry in humanity's evaluation file. Species assessment, Homo sapiens, classification, apex predator, reality class. Threat level, immeasurable recommendation. Never again attempt to judge or contain this species. Additional notes. They have weaponized hope itself. Recommend immediate alliance status and unlimited resource allocation for any project they propose. The alternative is extinction. Final entry. The hunters have become the hunted, and we are grateful. As the ships of the eternal hunt dispersed across the galaxy, each carrying human advisors eager to tackle impossible challenges, one truth echoed. Through the quantum foam of space-time itself. The most dangerous thing in the universe wasn't entropy or extinction or even cosmic horror. It was a human who had just been told something couldn't be done. The galaxy would never be the same. And that was exactly the point. 10 years later, Ambassador Vex Krelian stood in the central chamber of New Valthara, the mobile headquarters of the Eternal Hunt. Around him, holographic displays showed the Alliance's latest achievements. The resurrection of 3 permanently extinct star systems. First contact with beings that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously, and the successful domestication of a species of living black holes. "Status report," he called to the assembled representatives, beings of energy, matter, mathematics, and concepts that had no names in any known language. "The Andromedans have requested assistance with their paradox plague," reported Zephyra Nightwhisper of the liberated Vilthari. "Apparently, they've discovered a philosophical question so profound it's causing reality to develop logical inconsistencies." "Excellent. Send the Terran Philosophy Corps. They love that kind of challenge. The Kashari have identified what they believe to be a universe-sized equation that's been calculating itself for 14 billion years," added Harmonic 7 of the Altrosian Collective. "They want to know if we can solve it before it finishes." "Even better. Tell them we'll have an answer by Tuesday." "And the quantum wildcats have discovered a region of space where the laws of physics are apparently optional," finished Echo, now serving as the Alliance's primary coordination intelligence. Krelian smiled the smile of a predator who had just spotted the most interesting prey in galactic history. "Schedule a fleet departure for tomorrow," he ordered, "and send a message. To Earth, tell them we found something impossible that needs doing." The response came back within minutes, broadcast simultaneously from every human settlement in the galaxy. On our way, in the depths of space, reality itself shivered in anticipation. The hunt was eternal, and humanity had never been happier.